Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to talk about when innovation requires board oversight. And joining me is Bryan Wiener, who's a board member with Cars.com and is also the CEO of Profitero. Welcome, Bryan.
TK, it's great to be here.
I should also mention that you're part of our Next Gen Board Leaders community, which we are very proud of, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So this innovation, I always thought you were the perfect person for this. In previous shows, we had talked a lot about the importance of innovation to a company's future and its sustainability. Yet often, I know you and I have talked about this, often you hear when a company has to make a major shift in their direction, or whether they need to do a major innovation that's going to be sort of significant substance. You often hear companies talk about whether they might need to go private so that they can orchestrate this change without being in the crosshairs of activist investors or breach any far-reaching governance trends. And I know that both as a board member and a company executive that you've had experience with all this innovation stuff. So I'd be curious on your thoughts about when a company really needs to innovate, and how can a board sort of offer guidance with its experience and oversight to make sure that a company's successful?
Well, listen, it's a great question, and innovation and disruption is a topic I've thought about my entire career. I've spent the last 25 years in internet media and software related, that in environments that are just constantly changing. And I've become a big believer in the philosophy espoused by Lord Baelish, the fictional character in Game of Thrones, where he famously said, "Chaos isn't a pit, chaos is a ladder." And I believe that because I think that's how companies and individuals, by the way, really distinguish themselves in disruptive markets. And I think it's much easier to count which businesses aren't facing disruption, both the opportunity and the challenges associated with it right now. And having run both public and private companies, I can tell you that it's much easier to make transformational decisions as a private company. I don't think you can argue it, but I do think it's a cop-out to say it's not possible as a public company. I think the same fundamentals are required, the same storytelling is required. What makes it more challenging is you not only have to sell it to a boardroom of investors who really are intimately involved with your company, but as a public company, you have to sell to a broad group of shareholders who are less familiar. So you certainly do require a board that has the courage to back a plan. And as a CEO, you certainly need to have a very compelling story on why you're making the changes. But I think up to boards, coming back to one of the things you said, I think boards, it's incumbent upon boards to challenge management to think about how to innovate when their back is not against the wall. How are they looking around corners and looking for opportunities to bet in businesses or create niches before they're so big that it's just so obvious, but so late that the only way to get in is to make large acquisitions? So I think companies of all sizes need to be studying the white space, and it's up to boards to be challenging management while appreciating that they're overwhelmed likely with a lot of day-to-day challenges. But are they studying these potential areas for innovation so that they have opportunities to make calculated bets before we're forced in a situation as a board or as management to make bet the farm decisions? And I think Disney's been a great example of that when you look at what they did under Bob Iger. Sure, these were big acquisitions, whether it was Pixar or Lucasfilms or Marvel, but they weren't bet the company. And they not only helped the business, whether it was theatrical or licensing or other areas, but it set the stage for Disney Plus and that bet, which they aggressively made over the last several years and is really paying off.
So when we've talked about this innovation topic before, both you and I, and we have on the Next Gen Board Leaders as well, the topic of board composition as an important factor always seems to come up. And I know when corporations conduct a skills matrix within the board, that it's deemed as a critical exercise for both selecting new board candidates and obviously for proxy statements where investors are looking to, for that matrix to sort of get a feel for what the skill sets are. Personally, I've never had a lot of sort of faith in the matrix system. Whether it's, typically it's done by the general counsel without any sometimes collaboration. And to me, it's just too sort of static. I'm a perfect example of that. I was a bank president, and I'm sure that somebody would list me as a financial expert. And Bryan, I haven't worked in finance for 25 years, okay? I am so out of touch that there's no way I would be a financial expert today, but I'm sure my box would be checked for that, okay? And I don't believe that I've ever seen a skill set called innovation experience, okay, in a matrix. So knowing all that, sort of how do you get to the point of getting the right people so that you at least have some, quote, innovation experience on your board, or any skill that's going to move the company forward in the future that's not listed as a traditional experience, but is very valuable?
It's a great question, TK. And I watched the interview you had with Paul Washington in July from the conference board, and he highlighted the research they had done on the decline in strategic business experience and international experience on boards in favor of an increase of specific types of functional expertise. And that didn't shock me, but I do think it's concerning nonetheless, to your point, because it's coming at exactly the wrong time when companies need the expertise of how to actually innovate in challenging times more than ever. So I'm a huge believer. I do think boards need to diversify backgrounds, skills, and thoughts, and that's a good trend. But I think rather than when you talk about innovation, I don't think it's about, we don't need more chief innovation officers or chief digital officers on boards, which I think if we create another category called innovation, you may get that. And of course, if you asked almost anybody on a board if they have innovation experience, they would all say yes. I think it's more about, do you have board members who have been in positions of general management, either the CEO or let's say a division president, where they have transformed a company to take advantage of both headwinds and tailwinds. I think usually when we talk about transformation or innovation, it's usually there's a crisis, but I think it's just as interesting to say, how did you proactively create an opportunity when you didn't have to? And as board members, as well as CEOs, we get paid to have all the right questions, not all the answers. So come back to your question, I'm not a big believer in seeking out board members with a lot of deep but narrow expertise. I think that's actually the job of management. So like cyber is a great example. Obviously, it's a huge issue. Boards need to have good oversight of that. But I'm not a believer that we should hire cyber experts as board members. I think we need board members who have overseen and the challenges with cyber and know how to ask the right questions and ensure we have the right people at that company. So yes, we need a financial expert. I do think you need a technology expert on the board, but I think we need more experts who have run companies or run large divisions and have grappled with the challenges that the CEO is facing, where she or he is trying to manage the day-to-day business at the same time, have to find the right skills and personnel to be able to, and the capital and storytelling to be able to innovate.
Well, it's great advice. Certainly in the sense of looking for that. I know that the idea of single expert directors, when they tried to bring people in that had no other broad reaching skills, hasn't been that successful at the board level. So your point is very well taken there. So Bryan, I wanted to tap you one last time before we wrap this up, and we got about 2 minutes left, but what's the best piece of advice that you would offer existing boards on how to oversee their company's their company, making sure that they have the right culture and processes in place to, as you say, stay ahead of the curve?
Well, I think, I once got advice that said comfort is a good servant and a terrible master. And I think we need boards and management that are comfortable being uncomfortable. And that means the board needs to put a critical eye against management's plan, not only for today's success, the coming board year, budget year, but where are you taking the business? And in the businesses I run, I like to use the STP acronym, where story, team, plan, and in that order of importance. In this case, story and strategy are synonyms. But the story is, where does the company want to play in order to grow profitably over time? And how is it going to win in that environment? And then how do we reverse engineer success to decide what needs to be done today? Does that mean we need to make a bold transformational move, or can we make calculated smaller bets? Do we do a tuck-in acquisition and keep it aside to look at innovation? What are the things that we're going to do to make sure that we are looking around corners and growing? And I think that is critically important, that there needs to be that emphasis. Second is team. The board needs to evaluate, does the management have the structure and personnel in place to win, not only today, but where that business is going? And then lastly, what's that operational plan to not only execute this year's budget year and out execute the competition, but also be able to do that over the period of time and innovate. And so I think it's, how can we focus on today's challenges, but make sure that we have teams and focus on what's coming around that corner.
So again, great advice, and only reinforces why I thought you'd be great to cover this topic on the show. So Bryan, I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us on a very important topic. And hopefully boards have, put this on their agenda to talk about, because staying ahead of the curve is certainly what it's about.
Well, TK, thank you. It's always great to speak with you.
And that will conclude this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic to help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.